140th BlockTalks, we speak with Sean Kiernan, CEO of Greengage, to understand the effort to harmonize finance, innovation, and regulation. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is BlockTalks, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody, I'm here with Sean Kiernan, finally, after many attempts. Sean, welcome to BlockTalks.
It's an honor to be here, Mauricio.
I've known you for a few years. I think for the first year was in London. We've gone through panels and keynotes and events and all the good stuff we have in the industry. But I don't know if I know your entire background. So why don't we start from the beginning? You know, what's your background? What brought you to crypto? How did that work?
For my sins, have a more TradFi background. I say I cut my teeth at a subsidiary of Credit Suisse, so kind of the banking world. Ended up working in building a bank within that group here in the UK. So I moved here in 2010 from Switzerland. And then that office was something I helped to sell to Falcon, a private bank, which in 2017 was the first bank in the world to offer crypto products to clients. So we let people buy Bitcoin on platform. It was a lot of fun, like super early days, relatively, for the banking world to interact with the crypto space. Got the bug and thought that there was a big opportunity to do kind of crypto-friendly banking, if you will. And that's what was the birth of Greengage. So back in 2018, early days again, trying to bridge those two worlds of traditional banking approach and the crypto space.
In coming across with crypto within the banking industry, I mean, I've been in the industry for around 12 years now, so similar to you. What do you see in terms of the industry? And you know, I know this will sound cliche, but we're around the coming of age of crypto into the traditional finance world. How different was the world back then when you first went to, say, a client, say, hey, do you want to do crypto? They were like, wait, are you also selling drugs? What was the type of conversation back then?
Do you know, I had the most fun of my life. I think there were a lot of characters those days. Some early entrants into the space were the libertarian, the kind of, I call it the whiff of freedom that they would bring to just any question. And it was approaching financial services. A lot of the use cases are still financial services, but looking at it from a fresh pair of eyes, more from a technology angle, and also this kind of bent of philosophy that I always found intellectually interesting, let alone to find that bridge into my career. And I think there's still a spirit that early days kind of throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks. And we've seen that with the waves of innovation in crypto over the years. There's always these newfangled ideas, some good, some bad. And I think the characters on the whole that have stuck around, I have a lot of respect for, particularly those that don't need to work anymore. There's a lot of people that made a lot of money out of this space, and yet they're still here, they're still banging the drum, because they're actually believing in what the capacity for blockchain to change the world is. And for me, banking is part of my DNA. Like I believe in the need to create value and help move money around more cost effectively, and to price risk, and to get money moving back into the small guy. And I think this is where I get out of bed, and kind of what we're trying to do to help others as well.
One of the common thread between the people that I've interviewed on the show is that for those that are entrepreneurial, they found a problem that they faced and they were like, no one's solving for this. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do this myself. Sometimes they're angry. Sometimes they're, happy-go-lucky. But oftentimes they are resolved. Like they know that that's the calling, because they just can't live with the problem. And going from your TradFi borderline crypto career into launching your own enterprise, it's quite the space, right? It's not the same working for a bank and building a bank. They're very different profiles and probably different, probably documented psychopathies in their own right. how do you go from working at a bank and saying, okay, this isn't working the way I think banking should work? I'm going to build something that I do believe is going to be better, fairer, more inclusive, better for the world, net positive, and I'm going to do this with blockchain. How do you go from one to the other, and how do you convince yourself that that's the right path to do it?
Spot on. And this is one of the hardest things, I think, for any entrepreneur to kind of take that leap into the unknown, particularly if you've had a fairly stable paycheck. And we all take pay cuts. Like if you have a family, you kind of take risks that are really difficult to face, particularly your partner, and say like, "Hey, like we're now about to go into the unknown." And I think for me initially it was frustration that made me do it. I made an internal business case to the bank, and even though we were super early at Falcon into this space, I had seen what was happening at the time with Silvergate or Signature in the States, and admittedly, the very different time that was, but these banks were kind of growing incredibly, and I thought, here's an opportunity for, admittedly, a private bank to maybe jump a little bit into the world of more fast-moving types of clients, making payments and kind of the lending. For me has always been exciting, but like how do you get the wrapping digitally of debt or using the underlying collateral that is this new speculative asset, but with real underpinnings in many cases, into the mainstream. And the business case I authored internally was kind of met with skepticism to say Falcon's already jumped here, to jump again would maybe be too much. And I just felt like I had to do it. And having built a bank in the UK before, I thought initially like, here we go, slightly Bank of Dave. I will get some friends around the table and we'll try to do this ourselves. And I was completely, I think I would call myself an ingenue in this. I'd never jumped into the unknown. I'd always worked for bigger corporates. And to set up something on your own back is, I mean, I'm still here, so kind of labor of love, but a lot of difficulty and a lot of strain. But I couldn't see myself doing anything else at this stage.
I think that's the differentiating factor, is the fact that the stuff you do on the daily basis is the stuff you can't see yourself relinquishing for anything else. I think that's what keeps most of the successful founders going. Now, you touched on challenges, and you're operating in a country where the regulators and the legislators have been not entirely hostile to crypto, but they haven't really embraced the new paradigm entirely. Not to say that they're not doing things. I think the FCA, the Bank of England, have been at least listening to a certain extent, but concrete actions have been lagging, especially compared to other jurisdictions. And I'm not even talking about the US, but if you go to Hong Kong, if you go to Japan, if you go to the Middle East, if you go to even Brazil, there is a lot of interest and curiosity to do things and move things forward, even if it's not ideal, but there are steps towards that. Walk me through what types of challenges you're facing as you develop Greengage based in the UK, but also talk me about the things you've done internationally, because I know you've done things elsewhere that maybe serve to you as a founder as comparison basis of what is possible if the regulatory framework actually conveys innovation.
We've spent a lot of time trying to engage, not just in dialogue, but with the political process. We're completely agnostic. Like I'm not going to say yay or nay to one or the other party, but specifically to the UK, we've done our digital parliamentarians report a few years running, looking at who on record in the House of Lords or MPs are positive, negative, or neutral on words like blockchain or Bitcoin or crypto, just to kind of, for us ultimately, it's how do you engage with people that can help the regulatory process and the independent central banks to get comfort that if they do take risks, it's not just going to be on their own back, that they'll have something blow up in their face. And I feel for the regulators to a large extent, and not just in the UK but globally, because there's no upside for them to take risk. They don't have any pat on the back or kind of extra bonus if firms that they authorize or activities that they condone are successful. However, they do have a lot of pie on face if that goes the other way. And the political process ultimately, I think, is what drives change. I think the UAE, where we have another subsidiary for Greengage, is one of these countries that has put a lot of political support behind the regulators in accepting innovation and pushing innovation. And that's been a great example, I think, that has very much a commonality with English law and the approach generally to setting up regulatory environments, including the likes of the sandbox, for example, with the FCA. And having these kind of correspondences, you mentioned Hong Kong, like they've been in dialogue for some time with different jurisdictions. I think what we've carved out as a business model is essentially an unregulated business because we found it on one level difficult to become regulated. We've tried, and we've found that the areas that we serve, which are admittedly higher risk, we offer through 6 banking as a service partners access to crypto-friendly accounts, and we've carved out that model for our accounts business because we realize that any single one of these accounts providers can have hiccups. And that's not just with the regulatory processes, with their own internal risk appetites or with their own internal business models. And we needed to have points of redundancy, or for us, it was having UK and UAE. It gives us that additional lever to pull if we find that there's one jurisdiction which allows us to move faster than another. And the lending approach we take is very similar. We offer for our lending platform, like it's about 10 external balance sheet partners, mostly crypto back loans is our focus. But we can help then our clients find the right fit or swim lane for their respective accounts or lending needs. The US more recently is this amazing kind of hotbed of drive. And we've seen, again, the political process push the complete change of narrative from Biden to Trump, for better or worse, again. But we have now everybody in that administration who's supportive, with thanks to movements like Stand With Crypto or others that kind of, these are people voting with their feet, candidates that are supportive of the new wave of technologies and the new feeling of innovation. Again, that spirit of let's try new things. Let's not just say no for the heck of it. Let's engage. Let's have dialogue and see what happens.
I've been doing a lot of research on stablecoins and DeFi, partially because it's of interest. I'm a financial services guy through and through, but also because there's a portion of my current day job which addresses those aspects. But one of the things, as a Brazilian, one of the things that really makes me mad is that the distribution of stablecoins, they don't reflect the real world economy. Like 99.55% of the world's trade is not done in dollars. A lot is, but not 99%. When you go on chain, there's a incredible dominance of the US dollar. And again, I'm Brazilian. I live in the UK. None of these countries are dollar-based. You go around the world, the economy is Europe, entirely Euro-centric. Switzerland has its own franc, and like there is a diversity of denominations of currencies that speak to a few things, such as sovereignty and monetary policy and inflation and national interest rates and things like that. That if we are to replicate the real world on chain, the balances are going to change. So what is, being who you are and building what you're building, what is your overall kind of panorama around stable coins in terms of denominations, but also in terms of the use cases? Is the world of banking prepared to go on chain as enthusiasts like me would hope?
Yes and no, and this always takes a little bit more time than we'd hoped. I thought a lot of us were talking about real world assets and kind of digital credit 10 years ago, thinking this is going to be the game changer. I still think it is, but the patient are rewarded perhaps with building slowly, quietly while the world adopts. Stablecoins are the killer app for digital in the real world. It's been the real kind of entry level, and it's more than entry level now. It's properly kind of all the stats around what the percentage of total dollar transfers now happen in global stablecoins versus traditional payment mechanisms, cross-border particularly, and also then the number of U.S. treasuries bought by Tether and I think USDC is material. Like this is bigger than most nation states. The bit that we think is the real killer app next is digital private credit. What I mean here is the non-bank lending space needs non-digital dollars to really get adopted in the real economy. The way these transactions happen today, they're still being settled mostly in dollar-based stablecoins. And that's fine for cross-border for some use cases. And we see a lot of these for the cross-border payments case. We call it the sandwich trade, where it's not like a Brazilian needs dollars to move money internationally, but you can hop, and the sandwich is, say, Rise to Tether to anywhere else, and that liquidity in the Tether is what allows for that trade to happen, and have near instantaneous settlement versus Swift taking days, etc. That kind of use case we hear so often, but that doesn't necessitate anything but digital dollar in the middle, because there's not enough liquidity yet for that international payments market to see digital euros or digital sterling or digital rice kind of move into that. Whereas digital private credit is a local thing, and if you have a local business trying to borrow, and here we see already kind of SME invoice lending on DeFi, they don't want to settle in dollars because there's another FX hit for them if they move from digital dollar to digital sterling, for example. They want that to be natively settling in digital sterling, and those costs are not something that traditional businesses are going to feel that they want to wear. So we're seeing now that that's kind of the next push as this market scales, because there's real merit in digital private credit to shave off costs versus more traditional forms as well. It's a similar kind of, you could take middlemen out, you can take some additional benefits if you start to structure products on top of this stuff that scale more rapidly. Admittedly, still early days. And why I'm saying digital private credit first as a real world adoption after stablecoins is it's largely an unregulated market, so it can move faster, and it's 3 trillion of value that has a lot of ripe areas for innovation and cost cutting. And so we think this is going to be probably when we start to see more digital fiat currencies get adopted. And that for us is very important, because if the nation states no longer have kind of digital versions of their currency out there in the real world that's being used, it will hit the reserve currency status, and that will impact the cost of funding for countries like the UK or others that maybe were slower moving than the dollar. And the dollar's right now got a real leg up, which is great. Again, great to see the kind of push to buy more treasuries, but a lot of other countries are going to need to come up and find ways for their central banks to play ball.
We're moving into a direction where the real economy becomes the on-chain economy. When we start to do private credit, like you're saying, we start to seep blockchain into the supply chain, sometimes global, sometimes domestic. And there's, other than the economic factor or the monetary factor of these exchange rates, I think there's a whole lot of data that isn't used currently, because everything in a supply chain is sort of siloed. And it was one of the promising cases of early days of blockchains where supply chain financing, and then you have all the traceability across everything, and everyone can borrow and lend from every node on that chain, so everything becomes more fluid. And ultimately what you have is what we used to call self-liquidating assets, right? The moment the asset moves is the moment you have almost like a DVP in the supply chain, which is not what, it's not the speed you have these days. And I think that we're targeting that. Now, going more into credit, or maybe even in terms of overall landscape, we're talking about the UK quite heavily. I don't want you to name names, but in terms of being able to launch products and services in the UK and in the UAE, which is I think where you guys have the subsidiary. I'm not trying to diss the UK, but what have been the types of supports you found in both that have enabled you to actually build Greengage in these two jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I find so interesting is the law is basically the same, I mean, or at least the regulatory approach. It's more about the attitude, and can you have somebody that will come and have a dialogue with you on both sides? And there's a lot of marketing in this. I remember Malta early days positioning itself as a blockchain island, and Switzerland's clever with this too, and it had to be because the loss of Swiss banking secrecy kind of necessitated it to innovate. And Crypto Valley now, and kind of all these clever monikers that people threw out there. But ultimately, it's can an entrepreneur have security in building a business, and can they be sure that they're not going to be treated punitively for doing something that is within the bounds of the law, but maybe somebody somewhere along that chain doesn't understand what's going on, or on both sides isn't able to articulate what they want to achieve within within acceptable costs and time. And I think the UE is excellent in that marketing piece. It's kind of carved out a niche saying, yes, we're open for business. In practice, the UK isn't that bad. Like I think we've got a bit of a downer here sometimes on regulatory innovation. But if we think of the US as kind of the epicenter of a lot of the big corporate names, all the unicorns have a disproportionate amount in the US. Like most of them will have big subsidiaries here in the UK, and maybe it's not great not to have these kind of fintech champions as the UK does with the Starlings and Revoluts and Monzos being based here with their HQs. But there's a few HQs here that aren't that bad. Again, I think the GSRs and the Wintermutes are here. We've got the early teams at Copper and blockchain.com, and I appreciate they might have had to look elsewhere for regulatory licenses until recently. I think blockchain.com just got the UK permissions, which are great. So in the end, I think this is a slower moving place in the UK, perhaps than elsewhere, but there's still a massive FX center. It's a massive financial center, and they don't have to move as fast. But I would hope that they would be swift second adopters, and we've started to see that more recently. Perhaps the pivot, the penny's dropped. I hope.
I hope so, because one of the reasons I moved here 3.5 years ago was to help the industry develop and bring forth new products and services based on blockchain, and it was really sad to see 23, 24 with a massive pullback from even the dialogue. Like even the public dialogue was different, because one of the things that I'm really, the 16-year-old Mauricio would never think about this, but I wrote an article which was forwarded by Lord Holmes, who wrote the bill, the Electronic Trade Documents Bill, which is one of the most elegant, welcome to blockchain type of legislations I've ever read. And that was the moment where there was an open dialogue about what do we need to do as a country in the UK to actually enable this thing to happen. And all of a sudden, obviously, we didn't do well for ourselves as an industry with FTX and then SVB and then the peg of the USDC and all that stuff. And I think everything that followed kind of put a dent on even the appetite for working through all of that. But as you said, the US has been kind of treading the path on, how to move fast without necessarily becoming chaotic, I hope. But I think the UK needs probably to be a fast follow, because many other jurisdictions will be vying for that. Now, on your end, building Greengage, if you could pick one thing to change in the UK regulation right now as a builder, like if this changes, I have an entire avenue that I can go with my business going forward. What would be that? Like, what is the thing that if you could, if you found a single wish lamp in Liverpool Street, what would you ask your genie, your crypto genie?
I think we've started to see, and this is just as the industry's, as you said, grown up a bit, and we've cleared out some of the bad apples. I think equally, the regulators got staff on deck now that are aware of what's happening in our space. The bit in the UAE that I think really is amazing is that they're so open as to give their WhatsApp numbers to builders, which for me was kind of like, whoa, here's a way different approach to being entrepreneurial or commercial in response to founders that are investing in some cases millions in setting up offices, and they want that level of connectivity and soft tissue. I think I'm not going to suggest that the UK replicates that same level of high touch approach, but I think that magic lamppost would be, for many people, just a more open door for not just these consultation papers, but for individual queries to have a Q&A where you can be completely as open as possible and find solutions that are a bit more not having to need lawyers all the time in between the business and the regulator to moderate discussion. I think having that more open dialogue would get a a lot more things done more quickly.
One of the things that I've been dabbling into is the use of AI. And that is in an individual and also in a team capacity and a collaborative capacity. It's both amazing and scary at the same time. And because I'm a data guy, I know where the substrate is coming from, and it's obviously not something I entirely embrace. But I know businesses are looking into that, if nothing else, because they have to. What have you been poking around with AI as a builder yourself?
It's one of these things that you have to. Uh, Interesting. We're all using it, which is fascinating, but I haven't seen too many business models that like make the big bucks use it. I think the next couple of years we'll definitely start to see those emerge. And it was similar with blockchain and crypto early days. Like, other than trading, exchange custody stuff that was kind of intuitively going to make money, we're just starting to see the real world use cases. And I think AI is going to move that much more quickly, more likely because there's that much more money being thrown at it. Particularly in the US, they're spending like $1 trillion a year on innovation. It's crazy. I mean, on one level it's great, but on another, like, there's going to be a lot of burnt fingers. The bit that I'm fascinated by, and I think equally we're probably exploring this ourselves, is how do these two technologies interplay? And when you spoke about the trade finance use case, like, we have a lot of examples of heaps of data in traditional finance which are ring fenced or not really being intelligently interrogated to get better outcomes for consumers. And I think digital overlays, and here I mean blockchain specifically for payments and that pricing of risk, those two banking use cases that I keep on going back to as my North Stars. If you start to have everything on a digital backend that can verify truth and proof of work or proof of stake kind of mechanisms to get them to be as private as possible, but as necessarily interrogated as kind of the AI engines come online, like, you start to get really interesting use cases where we've struggled perhaps to get the institutional adoption, where there's a lot of players in a new space when you onload a new technology. When you have point-to-point or peer-to-peer things plus an AI overlay, trade finance is a perfect use case to strip out costs and get more money in there. And I think the more money you can get in there for that pricing of risk piece, the more trade you have, the better priced of goods, quicker delivery of service, like all these kind of massive things that we need proper mechanisms to have the right KPIs and the right information transferred to all the layers of the chain equally. And that can't happen in the digital world without that intelligence layer that I think AI will become. Also, the wallet piece, it'll need to be driven by, as AI agents come online properly, like, you'll need to have wallets as opposed to bank accounts because it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And it ultimately will be about the data. I mean, what data represents what and how you act on it autonomously is probably where the edge will continue to be. And hopefully then the whole promise of data is the new oil, which has been pretty much ring-fenced to larger players, will now be democratized into the actual real economy. This episode is supposed to air mid-May, so if you're listening and it is mid-May, this is a conversation on the early days of April. I don't want you to future guess anything, but what is your perspective up until now of 2026 in business in general, more so than the regulation, and what do you expect Greengage to achieve by the end of the year?
We're now all just kind of getting used to the world being constantly in flux. I think we had this illusion, perhaps during the Cold War, of there being a moment where we could project 5 years ahead in the future and kind of roughly know with a great plan where we would be. I think we're now in a stage where every month just throws these curveballs, and you think, "Gosh, like, where am I heading?" But there are some macro trends that I think we can all kind of see, AI being one of them. I think for us, we see for our core platform business being mostly accounts and lending, a new yield vertical being something we'd like to come online with. And for us, the DAT space has been really fascinating to see how that's emerged last year, particularly in the summer, having a lot of money being raised in kind of in a way that the retail world particularly, but also some institutional money can engage in the asset class. Not necessarily innovation yet, And that innovation piece for us, if you have pools of assets of any blockchain, and these are the coins or tokens as opposed to the underlying technology as such, there has to be a way to get these assets coming online to bear fruit. You can't just sit on them. You need to sweat them and hedge them. And I think for what we aim to bring to market this year, it's how do you get safe yield? How do you get mechanisms that you go in with your eyes open? And I can talk to kind of the three buckets of yield that we see as approaches. And our job is we're hoping to launch one of these yield verticals ourselves just to show that it works, and then we can help other clients to get that themselves. And the three roughly that we see are obviously the infrastructure yield play. So if you've got a token, you can get staking rewards, or you can maybe on, say, Bitcoin, get lightning rewards, that low risk, low reward relatively, but most people that have these assets probably should be looking at these types of things at least to get something back, and that's the plumbing approach really, that you put your assets to work. I think the other vertical for yield is that asset management play. So if you have an option strategy, or if you've got a way for trading that asset, and that's something that maybe isn't for everybody to do, but if you have that background of trading expertise, by all means, crack on and kind of do what the market makers do and make quite a bit of a return on the underlying asset. And the third vertical is the one that is closest to our heart, the one we're looking to bring online, which is what we call the net interest margin play, which is very much attuned to the banking world. But how do we look at these assets as collateral? They're worth, in some cases, billions as chains. We've seen lending markets use securities or precious metals or fixed income products as collateral for loans. And if you can get a loan that's cheap or relatively cost effective against these pieces of collateral, for example, into stablecoins, and then use those stablecoins for onward lending to the real world, you can get a spread. So that's kind of the trade we're seeing as something that fits to our expertise, and hopefully is something that we can show that works to the market, so we can then scale it for others.
And I love that you mentioned a few of these hard commodities, because we keep talking about tokenization, this, tokenization, that. And I think that the core benefit of tokenization is increase the speed in which these assets can be repurposed, rather than just, I have, I don't know, on-chain gold, and I have, not on my chain, but on the blockchain, not a golden chain, but the gold on the blockchain. Or I have, emeralds or oil or whatever other commodities we're talking about. I think if there's one thing that the stable coins have provoked is, and I love this because I stole this from Dante from Circle. It's like money at the internet speed, right? That's what stable coins are, and I think that the other asset classes that exist off chain, coming on chain as tokens, they get to the same speed, and ultimately global GDP is how fast the economies revolve and churn. And I think that's where I think the beauty of going into these use cases with a lot of expertise that you guys have, I think would bring a lot of attention to this can be done. This can be done well within the risk parameters. By the way, we have better data than everybody else because everything is on chain. I can actually throw an AI model there to help me manage the entire, supply chain risk of all these assets. And I think that's where I think the industry has to go, because it's really hard to talk to regulators about, speculative assets and, risky yields. They don't want to hear that. They want to see what is moving the economy forward and what adds to the GDP and how to make, an entire vertical more profitable, even if it's not a core crypto vertical. If it's another industry that is benefiting from crypto, that is a better conversation to be had with a regulator anyway. And I love that you guys are going after that. Now we're about done. I have a few questions that I do want to ask you around the day-to-day. So you're a builder. This is a non-stop industry, 24/7, 365. What's your recipe to remain healthy, focused, centered, mentally and physically while you're building in the industry? If there's a secret, I would love to know. But what have you been doing to kind of cope with, especially around building in two different jurisdictions, which is not an easy thing?
it's super stressful to build anything, and if it were easy, you wouldn't be building something kind of worth building. I think you'd be kind of riding a wave, or I mean, and that's great for some people, but it's not what gets me going. I think the two things that help me get through this are people and trying to make it as much fun as possible. The people, if you're working with good people, like it's so much more appetizing to kind of face a problem, and the interlocutors we have. And I think this is why I really like the industry. It's still, and yes, there's different firms doing competing things now. Like it's not that early day kind of that kind of blue ocean. We could do anything and everybody would talk to everyone. But generally, the people in here are quite nice and quite inquisitive and trying to change things for the better. And that's kind of a nice spirit to grow into. And I think the fun piece for me is I actually I actually enjoy our clients. I think what they're trying to do and what we're trying to do is move the needle. Like we're not going to reinvent banking. We're not a bank. I don't want to present that is the future that we're kind of outlining. But I think that if we can even open up a window that the small guy gets a better service for their accounts business, gets more access to credit to grow their business. And again, we're agnostic if it comes from the traditional space or the digital space. We see the digital space as the future, but we're here to help to bridge those two worlds. I think that for us is kind of when something completes, and we've done some pretty cool things over the years, like getting credit out to people that might not have been able to get it from the traditional space, like that's fun. And I'm perhaps a bit of a nerd in that, but I'd rather do that than do something copy paste that somebody else has done, because you only have one shot at life. You might as well do something a little bit off piste.
In the same vein, looking more broadly to the industry, is there like one thing that we need to fix right now to avoid working another 2 decades into this and realizing, oh, we didn't fix that one thing and now everything's gone to crap? What is that one thing and why?
I've had a lot of time to get my head around the city of London, which is the old square mile, the kind of medieval guilds, and the world that still exists to this day of having a time series to how people interact with each other. And I think you mentioned some of the bad apples in our space, so maybe not necessarily bad apples, but bad outcomes. FTX most famously. I think we still have some of these characters that, like, if we were better at self-policing, and I think the work you're doing to highlight kind of the good actors, and people that are trying to build things responsibly. I think that kind of work, we have a need to make sure that we interact with the right kinds of actors, and we profile the right kind of people, because I think there have been a lot of get rich quick schemes, and that's not necessarily great for any of us, to then have the big stream massive adoption that I think that is where the future will be. Like we have to get right user outcomes, right interfaces, and good players, and that takes time and it's hard, but it's a fight worth fighting, I think.
One particular person I really admire in the industry, when we had the big meme coin boom, in I think it was May 24, that is like billions of new meme coins were launched, and they posted something on Twitter like, "Oh, this is a new capital formation process." I'm like, no, let's not make up words here. Like this is not. This is one thing meme coins are not, is new capital formation. This is siphoning, and we've seen this before, right? We don't like that. But again, permissionlessness will bring the best and the worst in people, I guess. Um, in terms of the people in your life from your banking days that don't do anything with crypto, do you onboard anyone in crypto? How do you do that? What's the type of conversation you have? Do people call you every time that there's a Bitcoin all time high and ask, how do I buy this magic internet money, Sean?
Yeah, I mean they used to more. I think it's funny. In the early days, there was nobody out there that kind of projected trust. So I was invited on the BBC, for example, like super 2017, 2018. Like now there's Fidelity and JP Morgan and kind of all these big brands that offer the gateway access to custody and trading, and great. Like it's good to see the big names there. I think that's also kept us on our toes as new entrants into the space, and none of us are yet at JP Morgan level. Maybe Coinbase, like you can say, there's one or two blue chip names now that have emerged in our industry. But that level of adoption creates a wider discussion around not just can I get the weird internet money of Bitcoin, but what do I do with it once I have it, and how do I see the next thing coming, and that's where the fintechs or the innovators will add value, and that's what we're trying to do.
Very good. Listen, is there any particular thing that you would like the listeners who came down to this point with us to take away from this conversation? Any parting words for them?
I've got my own podcast, The Gauge, and I'd love to have you on it, so we have to kind of pencil that in. But I think this type of dialogue for me is so important to have. And I think people that are listening, first of all, thank you. But I think if you're able to come with an open mind to this space, it's something that for me has been hugely rewarding, but also challenging. And I think anything that we do in dialogue should pique an interest somewhere. So I would hope that listeners that might not know what this discussion necessarily was about in all shapes or forms would be feeling very open to kind of drill in further. And of course, you can probably find both of us on LinkedIn or elsewhere if you have any questions.
Sean, thank you so much. I hope to see you soon. Hopefully we will have been together in a few events throughout April. So looking forward to seeing you.
All the best, Marcia. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockTalks Podcast, on Twitter at BlockTalksPod or ZeroX Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to the BlockDrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbun Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Sean for his long story in financial services and now blending in finance with TradFi. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird. LFJ.